We greet you today. I want to take a few minutes just to talk about some practical things that as related to the pandemic. I've noticed among people who are spending more time at home, people are actually doing more cleaning than perhaps they had the time to do when they were working full-time and trying to provide for the needs of their families and whatnot. So this sort of came up in my thinking recently. I was cleaning, and I remember concerning even cleaning products, and I want to impress upon you some of the following warnings. Never, 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 ever mix Clorox, which is perhaps the best thing in our arsenal for cleaning. Never mix it with ammonia because a toxic gas is formed, which could be fatal. This happened recently in our area where a young man was lost because he was using some industrial strength Clorox and ammonia and mixing it and cleaning in a local restaurant. Unfortunately, he did not survive it. There were others who were made quite sick from it. So there are some other things that you might want to also consider. Never ever use bleach and vinegar. I want to say, read the labels. Please, ma'am. Please, sir. Read the labels. Vinegar is a wonderful thing to use in cleaning windows, and this could be used as an astringent, but never ever mix the two, that is vinegar and bleach. Never mix baking soda and vinegar. That also creates a chemical reaction that you don't want to experience. And also too, try to never use two different drain cleaners that are made by different manufacturers. Because of the chemical formula that one uses, it may not be so good for the other. So read the labels, and we talk about gravitating away from fear and dealing with fact. I want to, as a dentist, as we deal with smoking cessation, even speak a word concerning the use of vaping. We deal with this from a dental perspective. This particular virus has the ability to weaken the lungs. It has a hemorrhagic effect in some people, but it also, those that are smokers, if you really want to protect yourself, don't smoke, and especially now, because smoking over a protracted period of time does damage the lungs and your breathing and your respiratory system. And so back to vaping, there seems to be, according to the CDC, 37% of all teens, probably under the age of 18 in high school, have experienced vaping on one level or the other. And there are no guarantees of what is in their products, and there's no control over this. Some contain THC, some contain various flavors and whatnot. You must also remember, and even tobacco products, when they're heated and mixed with chemicals, other chemical compounds are created. This is something that I found to be alarming. Vaping increases your risk for a heart attack by 5, a multiple of 5. So if you're already in the high risk category, then smoking and particularly vaping could be to your undoing. Now, I want to mention this, that some of the symptoms that you are either in trouble or headed for trouble with the coronavirus is one of the early things that people have noticed is the loss of the sense of smell or diminishing of the sense of smell. Some may or may not experience initially the shortness of breath. Many do in the earlier periods of time experience cough, more than likely a dry cough or a non-productive cough. And as time progresses, whether you are aware or not that you have contracted the virus, and this is also, this material also relates specifically to those who are vaping and young. That puts you in the category of the older folks who know better, and the older folks who also are more apt to have what is known as comorbidity or other contributing factors to cause them to be more not only susceptible, but to receive what is known as a greater viral load. How much of the virus you take in initially may have a lot to do with your possibility or probability of recovering or not recovering. There also are some GI symptoms from, again, vaping. And when you put this in combination with the prevalence of the virus, then oftentimes you'll notice some of these symptoms: diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and in some cases, the loss of weight. It may even be accompanied by fever and chills, and in some cases, even in young people, tachycardia, which is a rhythmic beating of the heart, and an abnormal rapid breathing. You also may notice the fingertips may be a little bluer or bluish, or the lips may appear to be blue. This is due to decreased oxygen levels. And in some of these products, as mentioned, that are being sold by vape shops, there's water, there's propylene glycol, glycerin, flavorings, and some have nicotine, and others have THC, derivative of, you know, this in reference to marijuana, or it may have a combination of the two. So I just wanted to sort of mention these things just in case you weren't aware. There are frequently contaminants in these products, and you could very well end up in intensive care. This is the use of a volatile liquid while vaping. Now, the odd thing is the coronavirus is transmitted through droplets, which comes from the nasopharynx area. This is why when you see them on television testing, they'll use a long swab and they'll reach back, deep into the back of the throat area and get a sample, and then the testing. Now, it is my hope and it's my prayer that testing will be available on a much, 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 much wider scale. We have no way of knowing who has been infected already and have recovered, or we have no way of knowing just how widespread the community spread is. I've heard them speak of the herd, dealing with the herd as a disease can travel through a densely packed group of people. Your best thing to do is to remain and to maintain social distancing. Again, do not mix bleach and vinegar. Please do not mix bleach and ammonia, and never mix hydrogen peroxide with vinegar, nor mix bleach with rubbing alcohol. I know you want to be clean. I know you want to clean, but you don't want it to be fatal. I want to also encourage you to, most of you have gotten a copy of this through the mail. It talks about the coronavirus guidelines to America. And if I make an error, I want to make an error on the side of caution. The social distancing, the thing about it is certain folks in certain economic and social strata don't have the luxury of not going to work. So some of them go to work because we're living from paycheck to paycheck. But this particular guideline says if you're sick, stay home. If your children are sick, keep them at home and contact your medical provider. If you are an older person or have a serious underlying condition, stay home and away from others. Now, one of the great things today is that you can, through iPhones and iPads and whatnot, contact medical facilities, and you have this wonderful use of media to actually be seen and be encouraged to do or not to do certain things. You all by now know the value in hand washing, but not only that, like when I go into grocery stores and whatnot, I am very careful about touching and being touched by things around me. Sneezing and coughing, use your elbow or handkerchief or Kleenex, which should be properly disposed of. And most of you now know about the use of masks. Not every mask is a good mask. We've had the good fortune of some of the people who are excellent seamstresses making them even locally. They even put a little pouch in them to put HEPA filters in. And also, too, the use of gloves. I'm noticing now in grocery stores, I see the checkout people with gloves on, as well as masks. And they also, within the last week, have put up plexiglass shields so that you cannot breathe on them or they on you. Now, a word even concerning the mask, if you haven't heard this already. The mask protects you, but it also serves as a reminder not to touch your face. But it also keeps you from, if you are knowingly or unknowingly infected, from you breathing by droplets from your breath and your breathing, infecting someone else. So it's a two-way street, and it gives some protection and the reduction of the possibility of you walking into a cloud of virus that is hanging in the air, in the aerosol form. There are some built-in problems. Again, many people who are on the grind, is the term that I'm hearing more and more, do not, again, have the luxury of not going to work. So they must take every precaution that they can. You also should be aware that all gloves are not created equal. And you should also know that there are so many allergies, particularly to latex. So before you use them or put them on, please, ma'am, please, sir, read the label and know that some can cause extreme problems, including compromising of your breathing. When you go to your local dentist, all of them, to my knowledge, for the most part, will use non-latex gloves. And we do it in a preventative way, not knowing, or the person or the patient may not know that they have an allergy to the common latex gloves. Social deterrence. I'm hearing this from out of the area of Detroit, and particularly out of the area of New Orleans, that the rate of infection seems to be greater in those areas, partially because of the density of the population and the closeness of living, but in recent things such as Mardi Gras, which was in February, and of course the mass buildup or detection of or people that were infected did not really come to light, or is now coming to light weeks later. And some of the states who delayed in using social distancing are now finding themselves in dire straits. So don't be lulled into a false sense of security. There's been some very, very dangerous information put out. One was that some of the African Americans were not susceptible to the virus. In fact, the contrary is true. It's not so much that your susceptibility is more or greater than, but that some of the social and economic problems and closeness of living, the types of jobs that so many are working in requires you to be more at risk than others. I've seen some statistics that said that the rate of infection or the rate of death, which is more important, is 6 to 7 times among Blacks and Hispanics, more so than other races. Again, a lot of that is because of social contact, where you live, how you live, where you work, your accessibility or inaccessibility to healthcare. Now, one problem that I've run into, and many doctors in the Valley and doctors everywhere are experiencing now, is the fact that the social network is not, let's say, as effective as it could be. I've noticed even in dentistry, for those who have Department of Human Resources help, only those under the age of 21, I believe, can be treated for restorative work and whatnot. Our elders who are in most need do not have access through Medicare and Medicaid, for the most part, to dentures and partials and some of the things that would make their life easier, make their lifespan longer, that would also save money in the long run. The mouth, of course, is the gateway to your health. And if there are problems there, you have digestive problems and other related problems. So this is just a little bit of information that I wanted to pass on to you. Be prayerful, be careful, and also to watch what you do, watch where you go, wash your hands, don't touch your face. Now they're recommending that face coverings, and also to please remember there's a difference in some of the homemade masks and face coverings than from the ones that are much more well-made, and the filtration system in it is much better. But a covering, even a scarf, is better than nothing at all. I felt very strange going into a store in the last few days with a bandana or something like this over my face. I would not have dreamed of doing such a thing a month ago because it may not have gone so well with me. And I don't mean the coronavirus either. So we're here to maybe answer questions, to help you, to assist you in whatever way that we can. Now, in closing, I want to send you back to Revelations, the 6th chapter. And there are some notations there in the scriptures concerning the various horses that are riding in the latter days. One particular verse struck me, and after preaching and teaching many, many years, it never occurred to me in, I think, around verse 8, Revelation 6 and 8, where it speaks of how animals, there was a mention of wild animals and disease. My thinking was very narrow originally, and I only thought about being bitten or attacked by animals. But as time goes by, there seems to be a more enlightened or a greater understanding of possibilities. It never would have occurred to me over the last 30 years concerning the transfer of viruses from bats and from snakes and from other animals being kept in close proximity to the fish supply, chicken, and beef in these wet markets. And so what I saw there and what I'm understanding, and this is our understanding up to this point of airing this particular taping, that viruses can and have traveled from animal species to human species. And it also has given me pause, and in thinking why even in the Old Testament there were certain things that were forbidden, certain foods and certain things that were cautioned not to partake of. And as I began to search it out, today it's more applicable now than what it was when I first learned about it many years ago. So the jump of viruses from animals to people was quite simple. The experts and the virologists and epidemiologists have been aware of this. In fact, we were probably made aware of this in January and February of this year. But I'm so glad that it's better late than never, that some of this information is now being disseminated and people are taking a greater heed to what has been said. But I never thought that death from animals could be possibly equated to the transfer of viruses. And in those passages, it speaks of at some time, and it may not be this time, but up to a fourth of the world's population would be affected by it. So go back and read it and see if you got from this and these passages what I seem to have, I'm pulling from it. And it speaks of death by wild animals. The green or the pale horse kills a fourth of the population. Wars and famine. You should also know that whenever there is war, people are always left to roam, to wander. They're homeless. They're left without food, left without means of protecting themselves. And there's also, it speaks of bloodshed. This is from the Amplified. and also too about even how people became less benevolent and more edgy and agitated. It speaks of famine, the pair of scales. Famine always follows war, and famine always follows pestilences. But one thing that caught my eye in those passages of scriptures, it speaks of do not damage the oil and the wine. I will say this, olive trees are very resilient. Oil and wine were used for medicinal purposes then and still is now, today. So look at that and see if you're getting the same thing that I'm getting from this. In closing, it's really time for the church to arise and to begin to do what we know to do, that is to pray. 2 Chronicles 7, verse 13 and 14 says just this. I'm sure you've heard it much and often. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, would pray, would seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I shall hear from heaven. I shall heal their land. And so we do need that healing. Pray with us, and let's pray together, one for another. And as mentioned, the chemicals, be careful what you clean with. Be careful how you clean. And just learn all you can. What you don't know can hurt you. God bless you. This is Bishop Melvin Mosley. Be encouraged and fear not.